everything you just said, what I thought was like super profound and great to hear, and I appreciate that. One thing I always do, like on a small level, is always just say check the source. I feel like everybody has their own perspective and like processing filter settings. So whenever someone tells me anything, how I always naturally take information in general, I'm just like a natural benefit of the doubt guy. It's just like once I see it, I will never unsee it. Then it just done to me. But until I see it, I'll be like, I don't know, it could be anything, whatever. So especially, and again, not to be the guy, but if like a woman's telling me something, like whether it's my girl, my mom, my grandmom, this and that, a lot of women around my life, same as your life, I'll be like, all right, I gotta hear it firsthand first, whatever.
I gotta check the facts.
Yeah, I gotta check. My girl all the time. My girl can tell me anything, not anything, but like certain things. Oh no, I saw this. Okay, can I read it too? Let me read it first.
Doing your due diligence.
Well, you see, saying it's a trust but verify.
Yeah. I always check the source of anything. Someone tells me. So in these situations, whether it's your brother, your mom, it's unfortunate, but in not saying they were doing anything maliciously, but people just have their own way of process information. So before you bring your settings over to me, I need to hear this shit first.
Do your due diligence.
Yeah. And I think that would save a lot of time and confusion with many people in many different situations.
I agree.
Just check the source.
I think that is like transparent across the board. Like, like that don't mean you don't believe what's being said to you. Is that you have to? I got to be able to stand 10 toes on what's being presented to me, undeniably, without reasonable doubt. And the only way to do that is if I can verify that I saw what I saw. Now, sometimes I feel like some people's word is just gold, right? If I feel like you're an integral person,
some sources are that.
Some sources have proven themselves time and time again to where your word is bond, your word is gold. Right. I can just take your word. Because say if the facts were destroyed, I just got to take your word. And I know that you're not trying to deceive or mislead me because that's not who you are. I'll take it until being presented with something that can create reasonable doubt in my mind. And then that would take you from having a gold word to me having to check everything you say now.
Yeah, and a lot of things are malicious because even if, him, he could, if I say, no, you saw he came in, he kind of ignored me, this and that. You be like, no, it wasn't like that. Like, actually, he kind of cool guy. You probably just, maybe y'all just didn't see each other. He went to the bathroom.
Personal.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. So, and not that I meant to mislead you. It just be my own fucking emotional settings because the process that way. And now I'm thinking you thinking he an asshole when he really not that. Whatever.
That's what like the whole, when you talk about, your experience with your mother kind of misleading you as to who your father was and depriving you of that relationship. In a lot of ways, what I've seen, at least in my practice, and I've read through the research, is that deprivation of a father figure, whether it's based upon, some sort of bad intent of the mother, or just because the father is an asshole and stays away from the kids. There's scientific research that shows that the absence of a male father figure in a person's life, in their formative years, in their juvenile years, in their early adulthood years, there's a correlation between that and their ability to refuse criminal influence and recognize risk-taking behaviors. And that's a very common theme that I've seen amongst a lot of clients I've represented, where I get their pre-sentence investigation report, or I talk to them and it's, didn't have a father, didn't have a, a stepfather, didn't have an older brother that stepped up to the plate as a positive role model. And when you are deprived of that as a child or as an adolescent, you may not just be a bad kid. You may not be going up to, placement as a kid, but later on, those effects that had, that absence, the effect of that absence as a child has a tangible effect on your ability to refuse outside criminal influence as an adult. And I think a lot of times what happens is young men who do not have a positive role model, have never had a father figure for good or bad reasons. One of the reasons you talked about, where it's misleading by the mother, or just the dad is just an absentee asshole and leaves and goes and starts his own family.
Was in jail, so it was like for a large part of his life, he was locked up 27
True,
years.
But you didn't have a relationship with him that you could have had, whether it's through Global Telelink or whatever. It's still there's some level of that he could talk to you and be around you. Whereas
true that.
I'm talking about mothers who deliberately keep their kids away from their dad, or the dad says, I don't really care and I want to be out, and ultimately when they reach that age of majority, they reach that age where they're making decisions, their ability to refuse that risk and exercise accountability as a shield is lower. And then that's what I believe, at least in my experience, what I've seen, turns people into going into the streets, doing 100%. Things that are illegal, trying to find a sense of belonging, a sense of community, a sense of mentorship in these principles that are rooted in high-risk behaviors that they don't appreciate, that have humongous consequences, and then they go to jail.
Yeah.
And that ultimately ends up just not being good for anyone. I mean, if you're a young man who's got a criminal record at 18, I mean, you are 20 steps rather behind everyone else in society.
And it's crazy. To your point, I feel like what's also not often talked about is a lot of young boys run to the streets to get away from their moms as well. See, because I feel like women, because they crave security and stability, they have a hyper protective nature, and because they don't know how to raise. Now, let me be careful with my words. Women can take care of a man. But when it comes to raising a man to become a man, they can only speak from the experience of what they observe. They would never know what a man is feeling because they're not men, right? So with that being the case, when a man starts to go through his maturation stage and he starts to become a man and starts to want that freedom to express himself in different areas, and a woman clamps down on that to double down, I want to prevent my son from doing this. I don't want to do this, that, and the third. It's one of two things that gets created. They create a mama's boy because they overcompensate for the lack of, and they don't want him to work hard for nothing because they don't want him to stress, and they think that helps him, but that handicaps him at best. And then there's the other ones who try to prevent him from becoming that man that he's trying to be, and he end up rebelling against everything, all her authority, and now she has no control over him, and he goes run to the people who he's influenced by, because we as men, we're going to crave the male figure role model. It's inevitable. It's like whether it's a figment of somebody on TV or if it's someone on the corner of the block. But what tends to happen is we're very impressionable. So we go outside, these guys look cool, they get a lot of love and attention, which is what we desire, right? And we feel like, oh, this is what they're getting. How are they getting it? I always tell people respect is a global principle. How you earn respect is environmental. The way you earn respect in the streets is by violence and aggression and getting money, fucking women. The way you earn respect maybe in a courtroom is about representation, about how you play your words, strategy, everything like that.
Professionalism.
Two things could be true, but the same goals remain the same. We both want respect. So if my respect means I got to go slide on somebody, because if not, then my block look at me like I'm not a part of the solution.
Right.
And your respect is, I got to come here and defend my client to the best of my ability. It's like we both chasing the same goal, which is why when people look at people in the streets and they're like, well, how did they end up here? And I know I pivoted from the mom. I'm going to tie it back full circle. People look at it like, ended up here. This guy just wanted love and respect. And that was how he thought that he had to get it. So not having that male figure there, because my step pop, now granted, I still had my running, but again, that was a choice more than it was because I was like a leader. So it was more so me looking at it like, I'm going to protect mine. I never set out to harm nobody. I always set out to protect what was ours. It was never like, oh, I want to be the person that, I never was a bully, but I never liked bullies. Like, you ain't about to get over on us, but you can do you. That was always my thing. So I ended up still, because when you have heart and courage and people want to come and bully you and you not going for that, that creates conflict, and especially coming from the environments we come from. But having that father figure there, it did put me in a predicament where it was that sense of fear. Like it put my household in a predicament where I didn't want to let my mom down, and I was also afraid of my step pop out of a respect thing. Not having that, if I'm not afraid to let my mom down, my mom really can't control me. She don't even know why I want to do what I want to do, or my desire or need for respect as a man, and why I'm leaning in this direction to get it. So she think I'm just young, wild, and free, and she kicked me out. Now I'm like, oh, fuck you too. You don't give a fuck about me. The world hates me. These people accept me, because you don't got to put an application to get accepted into the streets. You don't have to be nothing. You can literally, they will give you an identity. You don't have an identity, the streets will tell you, this is what a shooter does. This is what a robber does. This is what a snake does. They're giving you these different, and you get to choose out of the characters that present themselves. And the anomalies are the people that are just thorough, that have good character, good integrity. But for the most part, there's no honor amongst nobody who's maneuvering in that way. So all of this could be a trickle effect, to your point of just not having that male presence, where it's like, no, you have to think before you do shit. You can't base it off how you feel. Give a fuck about how you feel. It's cool to have emotions, but you can't act off how you feel. Like I can feel away right now about a lot of shit. I'm not about to act off my emotions without that male presence there to create that framework of, listen, express yourself, do what you got to do, but you're not going to be running around here because you're mad, being a fucking lunatic and a maniac.
And to that point, what you said about the running from your mom, that was interesting, because again, I grew up like you said with your stepdad. I grew up with a dad in my life, having a presence of my father and my stepdad my whole life. I had my stepdad since I was 7. My dad been around my whole time, even though he was in another state. Always had a great relationship. And I imagine though that if I, cause also my uncle got life, so that was also a big part of my life. Seeing that, and I was like, oh yeah,
not for me.
That ain't the way. Like, no,
opposite example.
Yeah. So I had 2 father figures, a good mom, and I saw what the streets could lead to at an early age. And I was like, oh yeah, no, I'm good. That ain't really it, whatever. But I imagine even my uncle's situation did happen. If I didn't have 2 father figures and my mom being how she is, I can imagine a timeline of like, yeah, like just rebelling just because my mom's just a strong personality, and without that fear, respect of or just admiration of another man who I see. Oh no, I think this is a thorough way to live as a man, lead and be respected, whether not in the streets at all. Just I could see it as a good representation, and that was good. And also I think about as well, my mom always say that my grandma. My granddad, typical dad from that time, abusive, cheater, shit like that, whatever. But my mom
put that on all the men back then.
Yeah, that's what it is. I seen fences.
Alcoholic, abusive, and cheating.
Exactly. Family on the other side of town, shit like that, whatever. But my mom always give my grandma respect because she never put him down. She always said, no, you have your own relationship with your dad. You'll see how he is over time. I'm not going to say no. I'm not going to put no smell on his name. It is what it is. And sure enough, over time, my mom felt like he was a fucking asshole. It is what it was. And mom always give her credit for that, saying, your dad, you fortunate to have a great dad, so the reason put smell on his name, but I never would regardless. That's what she'd always say. However, I told this story in the other episode before how me and my dad relationship, how it is now, whatever. And of course, it don't fucking matter how I'm a grown ass man, but how him, my dad, and my mom get along. But they don't get along. They don't talk at all anymore. After like 25 plus years of having a great relationship at a distance, they don't talk at all anymore. And my mom can't help herself with the few times, and the only reason she even think about it now is because her grandchild is involved and my daughter. So just her little moments of emotional petty catty shit. Say, oh, your dad called your daughter lately, or you talk to your dad. I'm like, oh no, she's like, fucking dumbass asshole, this and that, whatever. They're like, oh yeah, like no. If y'all would have broke up bitterly years ago, you would have been a typical baby mom. Like you would have kicked his back in, all type of other shit.
Because he kept it cool with you.
Yeah. So I imagine, I still would have probably went down that path of not knowing my dad, or having some contention that's kind of controlled by the mom a little bit, just off of emotion and shit like that. So
I got a question for you though. We developing a friendship, so we did talk about your upbringing, right? Mm-hmm. So for the people who don't get to see that side of you, talk about you growing up and how you was raised.
So I grew up I'm an only child, first off. Yeah. So I grew up in only child. So I grew up in a split.
Friends.
Yeah.
Dark horrors, only children.
Love documentaries. It's like the only free time I get to watch stuff.
Dang.
But I grew up in a split family household. So my parents got divorced when my mom was pregnant. So I grew up in a 2 completely separate and distinct households. So I was with my mom most of the time. I was with my father, part of the week as well. And I haven't really had I had a better relationship with my dad later on in life, like you guys had, ultimately as an adult. Yeah. But again, my mom did everything that she had to do. She was the best mom ever to really make sure that I was, that I had a good upbringing. Yeah. But ultimately, I started rebelling. Yeah. I started rebelling against my mom. Like my mom wouldn't let me do. I always wanted to do combat sports. I wanted to play football. I wanted to play rugby, and she would never let me do that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that's when 14, 15, I started rebelling, and that's how my ass ended up at Valley Forge when I was 15 years old.
And that's like a boarding.
Yeah, it was the boarding school out in Radnor.
Yeah, so that was
it was like a hardcore military boarding school. Oh shit. And ultimately, when we talk about having respect from getting that positive male father figure, my dad was always someone that I looked up to, but I had a relationship with him from a distance. My dad, he was an immigrant from Croatia. My grandma was extremely hard on him. He moved, he was born the very end of World War II. My dad's 80. He's up there. Oh, yeah. So, he came from nothing in this country. So he had my grandma was really, really tough on my dad. And I admired her for that, but she was always nice to me. But, my dad didn't have a father. So he didn't have any example of how to be a dad to anyone. So we had a kind of a relationship from a distance growing up. But, in that same vein, when we talk about having that positive male father figure, that's only, in my mind, kind of the one recipe for success as a young man. I mean, I think you also have to have you have to cultivate, either through your environment or otherwise, a sense of self-discipline.